When you pull into your driveway, uh, does it feel like you're home or just stop?
You know, you set the tractor parking brake, you hear that hiss of the air going out. The diesel finally goes quiet. But inside your own head, the wheels are definitely still turning, aren't they?
They really are. Yeah. And if you're out there right now, just, listening to this in the quiet of your cab, keeping it between the lines at 2 in the morning, I just want you to sit with that for a second.
Mm-hmm. Just let it sit.
Because we're doing a deep dive today on something that, well, nobody really talks about. At what point did homes start feeling temporary?
Right.
I mean, the map says you live at a specific address, you pay a mortgage there, or rent. Your name is literally on the mailbox.
Yeah.
But when you cross that threshold after, say, 3 weeks running freight, the actual psychological feeling of arrival it doesn't happen.
And we should set the ground rules for this right off the bat, because looking at the source material, this isn't a complaint.
Right.
It's not so.
But why wouldn't a quiet, comfortable living room instantly trigger, like, relief? You're finally off duty.
Well, because relief requires your nervous system to actually recognize safety and stillness. And a long-haul driver's nervous system has been biologically rewired to view stillness as a lack of progress.
Oh, wow. Okay, so stillness is actually a negative signal.
Exactly. Let's look at the actual neuroscience of spatial mapping from our sources. Your brain uses a region called the hippocampus to build a cognitive map of your environment.
Right, the hippocampus. We've talked about that before.
Yeah, so for someone working a normal desk job, the hippocampus maps their house as the permanent anchor. The office is just a temporary visit.
Makes sense.
But when you live in a vibrating 10 by 10 metal box moving at 65 miles an hour for 300 days a year, your hippocampus has to adapt to that. It begins to map motion itself as your baseline environment.
Okay, that makes total sense. So when the physical body finally stops moving, the brain is just like lagging behind.
It's severely lagging, yeah.
It's almost like when you spend an hour running on a treadmill at the gym, when you finally hit stop and you step off the belt onto the solid floor, the floor literally feels like it's dragging backward.
Yes, that is a perfect biological parallel.
You are completely stationary, right? But your brain is still processing that forward momentum. You feel like you're still moving.
The researchers actually compare it to the vestibulo-ocular reflex. Your inner ear and your eyes have completely calibrated to constant forward motion.
Wow.
So when you park the rig and you sit at your kitchen table, sure, the physical body has stopped. The logbook says you are strictly off duty, but your mind's momentum is still rolling down the interstate.
That is so wild to think about. You're physically sitting there with a cup of coffee, but your brain is still, what, calculating distance to the next way station?
Or monitoring the weather front you just drove through. Or subconsciously listening for the sound of the air governor to kick out. You aren't settling in, you're just hovering.
Hovering.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of settling, you're just kind of existing in the space between loads rather than actually, being between life moments.
And it's important to note from the deep dive material here, it's not an anxious thing, necessarily.
Right. That's what I find so fascinating about this.
Usually when we talk about a brain not shutting down, we think of panic attacks or severe stress. But this isn't dramatic.
No, the driver isn't sitting at the kitchen table having a crisis.
Exactly. It's completely invisible to the naked eye. They just feel a little detached. The momentum of the road simply lingers. Home hasn't disappeared, but its shape in the driver's mind has fundamentally changed.
Which naturally leads me to ask, if the mind is still moving when the body is parked, what exactly has the driver anchored their life to?
They've anchored it to the movement itself, which completely rewires the concept of space.
Because normal folks, people who commute 20 minutes to the exact same building and sleep in the exact same bed every single night, their entire reality is built on a physical place, a fixed environment.
Right. A fixed routine. But drivers anchor their entire existence to movement, which means everything physical becomes temporary.
Everything.
Every single stop, even familiar truck stops, routes, or cities. They become purely functional. You experience them only in passing, never in actual presence.
Okay, but let me push back on that a little, or at least ask a question. Are we basically training our brains to reject permanence?
In a way, yes.
Is that why getting used to everything being temporary makes home feel just like another rest area? Because we've conditioned ourselves to not get attached.
That's a really good way to frame it. And the sources validate that exact thought. The brain adapts by no longer expecting permanence anywhere.
Which is a survival mechanism, really.
It is. It's highly useful on the road. It keeps the driver flexible. It keeps them moving without getting emotionally bogged down by leaving a place.
Right, if you got homesick for every nice truck stop you ever parked at, you'd never get any freight moved.
Exactly. But the cost of that flexibility is heavy. Because when you return to a place that should be permanent, like your actual home, your brain registers it, just like a truck stop.
Wow, just a really nice truck stop.
Useful, necessary, real, but not fixed, not permanent. Because you measure your life by miles now instead of days.
Miles and appointments instead of like standard calendars. It's Tuesday, but what does Tuesday even mean when you're just looking at your available hours of service?
Tuesday's just a window between a pickup and a drop-off. That's the reality of the road.
So, okay, let's take a pause here and just reflect on what happens when a mind that is fully wired for movement sits down at a kitchen table with their family.
Yeah. This is where it gets into the subtle creeping distance that grows between the driver and the people around them.
The human side of the highway.
Yeah.
And I want to keep this super grounded, just observational, because it's not heavy melodrama. It's a reality.
It is a quiet reality, yeah.
It's about being physically present in the living room, sitting right next to your spouse or your kids, but mentally, you're still checking mirrors. You're calculating that next route.
The sources outline these micro moments that build this gap. It's really subtle stuff.
Like what? What kind of micro moments?
Like a slightly shorter conversation than usual.
Yeah.
Or missing the punchline of a joke because you drifted off.
Yeah, or that subconscious habit of checking the clock on the wall instead of actually settling into the present moment, just waiting for time to pass.
Exactly. You're looking at the clock not because you have somewhere to be, but because your brain is used to tracking time as a resource that's ticking down.
And I want to emphasize, if you're listening and you're nodding along to this distance is completely unintentional.
Entirely
It
unintentional.
isn't created by conflict.
Yeah.
You aren't mad at your family. It's purely the byproduct of a life built on motion.
The hardest truth from the psychological profiles we reviewed is that you don't always notice this quiet distance until it's already there.
You don't see it happening in real time.
No, you don't, but the people around you, they feel it. Your spouse feels it. Your kids feel it. You aren't entirely gone, but you aren't fully there either.
Not gone, but not fully there. Man, I'm just going to let that sit for a second.
Yeah, it's a heavy realization.
Because if you're out there driving right now, you probably recognize yourself in that description. And that leads to a really tough question. What happens when a driver finally tries to get some real sleep?
This brings us to the paradox of stillness.
Right, because to a normal person, someone working a 9 to 5, rest is a reset. It's a chance to just exist without any urgency. You lay down, you are done for the day.
But for a driver, that concept of rest completely morphs.
So I have to ask you, the listener, directly, do you ever actually shut off or do you just pause?
It's usually just a pause. Rest becomes a gap between obligations. It literally feels like a waiting room.
A countdown to the next departure.
Exactly. Stillness is no longer the goal. Stillness becomes an interruption to the movement that defines your entire life.
So your body is in bed, but your brain is treating sleep like it's just a mandatory DOT break.
Yes. The psychology of this shift is deeply rooted in conditioned readiness.
Conditioned readiness. Break that down for me.
Drivers maintain a low-level readiness at all times. They watch the time and anticipate the next move, not because they actively choose to, but because their nervous systems have been conditioned to do so.
It's hardwired.
Completely hardwired. You've spent years training your body to wake up at the drop of a hat, to sleep in a noisy cab, to be ready to roll. You can't just turn that off because you're on a memory foam mattress.
And there's this deep irony in that. The very thing most people in the world crave, right? Absolute stillness, peace, and quiet.
Yeah.
That exact thing can start to feel deeply unnatural and actually uncomfortable to a road-bound mind. The silence in a regular house can be deafening.
Because silence in the cab of a truck usually means something is wrong. If the reefer unit stops or the engine shuts off unexpectedly, you wake up in a panic.
Oh man, that is so true. The absence of noise is a threat signal.
Exactly. So you put that same nervous system in a perfectly quiet suburban bedroom, and it's scanning for threats because it's too quiet.
Wow. So rather than framing this inability to rest as some kind of personal flaw or a psychological problem, we really need to look at the bigger picture here.
We do. We need to look at how the driver's entire baseline has evolved.
Let's talk about that new baseline, because the road violently rewrites what normal actually feels like.
Violently is a good word for it. It's an extreme environment.
You're sleeping at odd hours. You're eating whenever it's physically possible. You're living amidst constant noise, endless motion, total unpredictability. That becomes the standard baseline for your body.
Right. Therefore, stepping into a perfectly quiet home shouldn't feel relaxing. Biologically speaking, it should feel alien.
Because it is alien to your new normal.
It's too still, it's too quiet, and it's too fixed. It's the opposite of everything your body has adapted to survive.
Which means feeling disconnected from home doesn't mean something is broken inside you.
Not at all. And I want to strongly reframe this experience for anyone listening. It means your system has adapted perfectly to a demanding lifestyle.
It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do to keep you safe out there.
Exactly. But adaptation cannot simply be switched off like a truck engine. It carries over into every space you enter, including your living room.
I really like looking at it through the lens of strength, too.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to sit there and think about what you've lost. You think, oh, I've lost the ability to relax.
But you've actually gained a highly specialized skill set.
Right. Drivers have literally learned how to exist in multiple spaces. They function at a high level without needing everything around them to stay exactly the same.
They don't need a stationary anchor to survive. They carry their anchor with them.
That is profound flexibility.
Yeah.
True situational awareness.
So the conclusion of all this analytical research we've been deep diving into, it confirms that home hasn't disappeared.
It's still there.
It is simply no longer the absolute center of everything for you. And that is a hard truth, but it's not a negative one.
It's just a shift in gravity. Your center of gravity moved from a house to the highway.
A testament to human flexibility, really.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a quiet close, I'm just speaking directly to you right now, out there in the cab. We aren't going to try and tie a neat little bow around this.
No forced inspiration here.
No. There's no 5-step plan to fix this, because maybe it doesn't need fixing.
Maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe this is just exactly what the road does to a person.
It's a shared reality.
Yeah.
Millions of miles driven by millions of people, all feeling that same quiet distance when they park the truck.
You're definitely not alone in feeling it.
So I want to leave you with a final, just a lingering thought to mull over while you watch those white lines roll by tonight.
Something to think about on the long stretch.
Yeah. What would it actually take for home to feel like a place again?
That's the real question, isn't it?
Or maybe it never goes back to what it was. Safe travels out there, keep the rubber side down.